All right, so the story is, and please don't stand up and throw your wrappers away one at a time the whole period, just keep them with you till the end of the lecture. When Roosevelt decided not to run for re-election in 1908, he threw his support behind a close friend, William Howard Taft. Taft went on to win the election. He defeated William Jennings Bryan. That poor guy lost a lot of presidential elections, and he became the nation's 27th president. And we did mention, I think, did we not, that Taft, as you mentioned, Taft and John Kennedy, the only two presidents that are buried in Arlington. Did we tell you about where Roosevelt, what he did after the presidency? Okay, well, after William Howard Taft was inaugurated in March of 1909 and Roosevelt was out of office, he went on a hunting safari to Africa. And he spent almost a year there. Actually, he spent a little more than a year. Let me correct myself. He spent a little more than a year in Africa hunting with the party of his. And they did pretty well. During the 365 plus days that they were hunting in Africa, they shot 296 big game animals, including, in that 296, 9 lions. So Roosevelt leaves the presidency in March of 1909 after William Howard Taft is inaugurated into the presidency. And he goes big game hunting in Africa for almost a year, actually more than a year. And he and his party end up shooting 296 big game animals, including 9 lions. That doesn't mean he shot them all. Do you get that? Okay, he didn't shoot them all, but his party did. Now, they even brought back specimens of animals that they had shot when they were in Africa, and they're still being displayed today in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. So if you get there and go into the right place, you can see some of these specimens that Theodore Roosevelt shot when he was on this big safari hunt. Okay? Well, he's gone more than a year, and when he comes back home, he finds himself again in the middle of national politics, somewhat by mistake. So he's left the presidency. He's kind of thinking maybe politics aren't his thing anymore, right? He's done his duty. Didn't want to run for re-election. He gets back from Africa, and he's right in the middle of the storm again, because what has happened is the progressive branch of the Republican Party is very upset with President Taft. And so they break off and they want to form a new political party, and they want Theodore Roosevelt to run for president on this third party. And there was a little bit of concern about his health and stuff, so when he was interviewed by a local newspaper, when they asked him how he felt, how his health was, he said, "I feel as strong as a bull moose." Thus, the name of this third party of progressive Republicans in the election of 1912 is going to be what? The Bull Moose Party. Okay, so again, Roosevelt gets back from Africa. The progressive Republicans have split away from the regular Republican Party. The progressive Republicans are upset with President Taft. They want Roosevelt to run in the upcoming election of 1912. They're going to split up and form their own party. And when interviewed about the possibility of running for president, how he felt, he says, "I feel like a bull moose." And so there's where the Bull Moose Party came from. Now, this is going to be an interesting election because there's going to be 4 political parties and 4 different candidates. Okay? We know that the Bull Moose Party is going to nominate former President Theodore Roosevelt, right? We also should know that the Republican Party is going to nominate President Taft for re-election. Those are your 2 main parties, or 2 main parts of the Republican Party. The other main party, the Democratic Party, is going to nominate Governor Woodrow Wilson from New Jersey. So you've got the progressive Republicans, now known as the Bull Moose Party, nominating Theodore Roosevelt. You've got the regular Republican Party nominating President Taft for re-election, and you've got the Democratic Party who nominate Governor Woodrow Wilson of New Jersey. And then all of a sudden you have another branch of the Republican Party split off. The Socialist Party forms, and they nominate Eugene B. Debs as their candidate. So who's got the advantage here when the Republican Party split up basically into 3 different groups? I know he's part of the Republican Party. The Democrats. So Woodrow Wilson's got a good advantage here because the Republican Party's in shambles. There are 3 different political parties running that are Republicans. Socialist, Bull Moose, and regular Republicans, basically against the Democratic Party and Governor Woodrow Wilson of New Jersey. So, the campaign begins, right? And on October 14th of 1912, Theodore Roosevelt is campaigning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On October 14th of 1912, when's the election? November, so just before the election, he's campaigning, he being Theodore Roosevelt, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's going to give a speech, and he's being paraded in his convertible, and he's standing up in his convertible and waving to people as they are taking him to give his speech. Well, as he is standing up, waving, shaking hands, etc., all of a sudden, a saloon keeper by the name of John N. Schrank pulls out a pistol, takes a shot, and hits Roosevelt as he's standing in his convertible. So on October 14th of 1912, during the campaign, Roosevelt's scheduled to give a speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He is standing in the back of a convertible on some sort of a parade being taken to the speech site. And as he's standing there campaigning, so to speak, and waving at the crowd, a saloon keeper by the name of John N. Schrank pulls out a pistol and shoots Roosevelt. Shoots him right in the chest. Fortunately for Roosevelt, his 50-page speech and his glasses case was in his pocket where the bullet hit, slowing the bullet down where it didn't go through him. It just lodged in the chest muscle in his chest. But he was hit and was bleeding. So this shot hits Roosevelt in the chest. Fortunately for Roosevelt, he's got a 50-page speech and a glasses case in his pocket in which the bullet hits, slows the bullet down. It does penetrate and lodge in his chest muscle, however. Well, Elbert Martin, one of Roosevelt's aides and an ex-football player, leaped on Schrank, wrestled him to the ground, and took the pistol from him. So right after Schrank shot Roosevelt, Elbert Martin, one of Roosevelt's aides and an ex-football player, leaped on Schrank, wrestled him to the ground, and took the pistol from him. After being knocked back into the car by the force of the bullet, Roosevelt straightens himself up, sets up in the car, and says, "I'm all right, I'm all right." And he concludes, he being Roosevelt, since he's not coughing up blood, he doesn't believe that the bullet has punctured a lung. Okay? So despite the fact that his aides are urging him to go to a local hospital for treatment, he refuses and tells them just to bandage it up until after the speech. Tough old bird, isn't he? So he determines that the bullet has not punctured his lung because he's not coughing up blood. They urge him to go to the hospital for treatment, but he refuses, says just bandage me up until after the speech. So, they bandage him up, the bullet's still in his chest, and he prepares to address the crowd and give a 90-minute speech. So after his quick treatment for the wound and a bullet still lodged in his chest, Roosevelt prepares to address the crowd with a 90-minute speech, blood seeping into his shirt. Well, this is interesting political statement. So he gets up, he's going to give his speech, and he says to the crowd, he says, and you don't have to write this down, he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot. But it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Huh? That's what he said. Threw a little politics at him. Well, and he said that, a guy in the crowd, a heckler, kind of gets on him about, calls BS on him, say, hey, you know, you're a fraud. That's not true. Roosevelt was a little quick on the temper. He got so upset by it, he whips open his shirt, shows his bare chest and the bandage with blood on it, and then goes ahead and gives his 90-minute speech, and then goes to the hospital for treatment. True story. So, interesting dude. Now, when he goes to the hospital for treatment, they did have x-ray by that time, and they probed with a probe, right? And they noticed, as I mentioned, that the bullet had been lodged in Roosevelt's chest muscle. But it was pretty close to his heart. So the doctors concluded it would be much more dangerous to try to take it out than it would be just to leave it in. So he lived the rest of his life with that bullet in his chest fairly close to his heart. Lived the rest of his life with it. Can't make this up, can you, Jonathan? Now, your thought must be, well, what about John Schrank, right? What was his story? Well, when they interviewed John Schrank afterwards, he said he didn't intend to kill, quote, the citizen Roosevelt, but instead he intended to kill Roosevelt, the third termer. Okay, so Caleb, what does he mean by that? I didn't really want to kill Roosevelt, the citizen, but I really wanted to kill Roosevelt, the third termer.
He didn't want to have him as a president?
Yeah, he didn't want to have him serve what would have been, in essence, 3 terms. McKinley's, one of his own and another. But he didn't mind him as a regular citizen, right? But he didn't want him to be president for 3 terms. He also told doctors that interviewed him that it was the ghost of William McKinley that convinced him to do it. So he wasn't all there. He didn't have all of his marbles in the same jar. So he told psychiatrists and doctors after being interviewed that it was the ghost of William McKinley that told him to do that. Well, he was committed to a hospital for criminally insane in Wisconsin, and he actually remained there for 29 years until he died in 1943 of pneumonia. So John Schrank was committed to a mental institution, correctional facility, where he spent the rest of his life there, 29 years, finally dying in 1943 of pneumonia. Now, this is kind of unusual because we're still talking about the profile of the election. I don't think this might happen today, but the 2 major candidates, President Taft and Woodrow Wilson, suspended their campaign until Roosevelt healed up and could resume his campaign. You think you'd see that today, maybe? I'm not sure you would. So both Taft and Wilson just quit campaigning, and they said, you know, Mr. Roosevelt, out of respect, former president, when you're ready to start the campaign again, let us know. And then they all commenced campaigning again. So it didn't take him a long time to recover, but that was kind of a nice gesture to quit campaigning. Well, this is an amazing election result because you have a former president running and an incumbent president running, which usually is kind of a big thing. Here are the electoral votes in the election of 1912. President Taft, the incumbent, gets 8 electoral votes. 8. Franklin Roosevelt, who served almost 2 terms as president, gets 88. And Woodrow Wilson, the Democratic candidate, because of the tremendous split in the party, gets 435 electoral votes. That is phenomenal that a Democratic candidate or any candidate can defeat a former president and an incumbent president that badly. 435 for Wilson, 88 for Roosevelt, 8 for President Taft. And with that, we finish the first line, and Woodrow Wilson right here becomes the nation's 28th President of the United States. What's he going to inherit? Pretty quick here, our next topic. not subtopic, next topic we'll be talking about. No, next topic, next test material, what's he gonna inherit? No, that's already been that, World War I, yeah. Okay, we'll get to that. So, now, we're still on the Roosevelt profile. So what does Roosevelt do after this loss in 1912? The guy doesn't know how to take a normal vacation, right? So he goes to Brazil with his son, and they search the Amazon River for this mysterious river of doubt, which is supposed to be this tributary that goes into the Amazon that nobody can quite find. So he doesn't know how to vacation very stress-free. So he takes his son, they go to the Amazon River in Brazil looking for this mysterious lost river of doubt. Now, the expedition was really hard on Roosevelt's health. He came back home 55 pounds lighter than when he left. And he wasn't an obese man when he left. So, I mean, this took his toll. He's getting a little bit older, right? And he had a couple of things happening to him. I'll tell you one thing that happened to him in particular. These canoes are really important. You got to think these guys are over there. There are snakes over there. There are malaria from mosquitoes over there. There are piranhas in the water over there. And so you don't want to lose any equipment or supplies. And not only that, you have natives over there that are cannibals. So this is not like a vacation, right? Well, anyway, one of their canoes gets away, and he scrambles to try to get it on the river. He falls against a rock, a sharp rock, and cuts his leg open pretty bad. Well, they're in a pretty unsanitary place, are they not? And it's getting infected, and so basically they just do a primitive surgery on him where they cut away the infected part of your leg. And he probably easily could have died, but didn't. Tough old bird, I'll tell you. So again, a barbaric surgery was performed in less than sanitary conditions on his leg, but he survives, and they do find not the River of Doubt, but they do find another tributary to the Amazon that was unfound, and it was named in his honor, Rio Roosevelt. So there is a tributary to the Amazon River, which is not the River of Doubt, in which they discovered. It was a new discovery, and it was named by the Brazilian government, Rio Roosevelt. So he comes back from that vacation, so to speak, and guess what he wants to do? Huh? No? What's he want to do again? What? No? He wants to run for President of the United States. And he's really hoping to get the Republican nomination in 1916. So he gets back from his vacation in Brazil, really hoping to gain the Republican nomination for president in 1916. Unfortunately, he's past his time and he doesn't get it. So he goes back to normal life for a period of time. However, on January 6th of 1919, he dies unexpectedly of a blood clot to the heart at the age of 60. So he goes back to normal life. When he gets back and doesn't get the nomination, unfortunately and suddenly on January 6th of 1919, Theodore Roosevelt dies unexpectedly of a blood clot in the heart at the age of 60. He was buried near his home at Sagamore Hill in the state of New York. Now, see if you guys can get this trivia question the other class didn't get. Theodore Roosevelt was one of 4 presidents to what? One of 4 presidents to what? No way! It took the other class like 10 minutes to figure that out. Yes! One of 4 men, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Roosevelt, to have their names on Mount Rushmore. Very good. All right, let's have a quick review here, shall we? And we'll talk about the trip a little bit. All right, you're going to have to work a little harder. I'm pretty kind to give you these reviews, but I'm going to give you a little bit different review than normal. I'm going to We're gonna have 25 matching on this test. And I'm gonna, your best bet would be to take out your ID sheet and check or highlight the names you need to know. These 25 names will be on your test in matching form. You know what that means, right? A, B, C, D, etc. So you can start at the start of your ID sheet. We'll make it easy for you, and we'll tell you the names you need to know. 25. Are we ready? Okay, Samuel J. Tilden. Rutherford B. Hayes. David Davis. James G. Blaine. James Garfield. Chester A. Arthur. Winfield Hancock. Lucretia Randolph. Charles J. Gateau. Grover Cleveland. Benjamin Harrison. Caroline Scott. Mary Lord Dimmick. James B. Weaver. William McKinley. William Jennings Bryan. Henry Teller. George Dewey. John Hay. Ida